I've been doing business a long time, so not as long as you. But they say, if at first you don't succeed, try teaching. So here I am. But yeah, Greg's right. I've always been an engineering CEO. So this last 18 months, I've become a go-to-market CEO by necessity. And I've learned a lot that I never should have imagined I would learn sort of going through that journey. What we've done, and I'll walk through a bunch of the details of what we've done, but we've made an enormous amount of radical changes to go-to-market. We've basically just rebuilt the entire strategy, the entire way the organization operates around AI first. Not AI augmentation, but AI effectively running the engine. So Greg asked me to unpack some of these details here, and I was like, sure, I love hearing myself talk, and this is also super wildly exciting to me. I've like fallen in love with just the go-to-market of it all. I feel like it is an under-optimized problem in the business. I think there's a ton of things that we just do because we're following the same patterns we've always done. I crack this joke sometimes that sales is basically car sales, just transferred into a software company, but it functions effectively the same way. We haven't really reasonably innovated on many of these things. So what we've noticed is that as we've tackled sort of re-engineering this, not only have we made things a lot faster, but we've changed and started tackling things that are like now economically possible. And it's really interesting to take something and be like, a year ago, there's no way we would be able to budget for something like that. It would just have cost too much per account or cost too much per customer. And now we look at it and the cost has dropped frequently by multiple orders of magnitude. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to focus, kind of take a step back, and rather than thinking about marketing as a whole, I'm going to focus on 3 areas where we have kind of re-engineered the cost basis of go-to-market. Things that used to cost a lot and now don't. But before I do that, I actually want to talk about, this is one of my favorite topics. It's a soapbox, and I have a soapbox I'm standing on, so I want to talk about it. But I think we are going to see across just all of business that the cost of doing business is just dropping precipitously. It's already happening right now. But it's not just business either. The thing that gets me excited, I grew up a fan of Star Trek, and there's this like moment in every time the explorers meet a new civilization, they're like dealing with whatever problem they have. They're like, there's this point in human history, but we figured it all out. And I actually think we happen to be alive in that 100 years they always referred to where we kind of figure it all out. But we're seeing that science, medicine, material science. I think this century, basically everything that you can imagine solving with knowledge, we're going to see solved. And it is, I like to imagine that if time travel were ever invented, I think most people are going to want to travel back to this 100-year span because the most is going to change all at once in human history. A book that I've been reading recently, absolutely, it's one of the most incredible explorations into the way we think about economics from the cost of energy. So it's called Energy and Civilization by Vaclav Smil. And it just breaks down everything you do as like watts per hour, right? So it used to be that the vast majority of all available energy on Earth was just creating food. We had to do it to survive, right? So every able-bodied man was either fighting war or creating food. And the more wars we fought, the less people we had to create food. And we needed basically the sum of all people to produce enough food to feed humanity, right? And then we started creating machines, and then you're like, oh, well, we don't have to, like 30% of our people can be not making food, and we started innovating. We started doing things with that extra time. And so this book tracks almost everything through history in just watts per hour. And I think what we're going to see in marketing, go-to-market, and running a business is the watts per hour of doing things is just changing drastically. There's things that just simply require a lot less energy anymore to do. And so the question, there's a pattern that starts emerging every time you look. When you take anything and have a radical change in the watts per hour required, you take a luxury, and the luxury becomes a commodity. Most of the things that we think of commodities today, even in the last 100 years, might have been considered a luxury, and certainly over a 1,000-year timeline. So the question is not, will it all happen? It's how fast. And right now, there's a reasonable sample set of how fast some of this stuff is happening. Like, it is actually happening so much faster that you realize unless you're an AI engineer. And we're an AI software company, so we have AI engineers out there kind of at the edge using every new capability. And this is where we got inspired a year ago. But we were like, what if we took one of these AI engineers and actually built the tools that we know eventually will exist for our own use? And we'll talk a little bit about how that went. But I want to give you some examples of how this actually has worked through history. So in the 1850s, cost of aluminum was $1,200 a kilogram. It was one of the most precious metals in the world. If you were royalty, you ate off of aluminum plates. It was a sign of nobility. By 1890, it had dropped to 50 cents a kilogram. And that's because we had invented a new scientific sort of way of getting aluminum, right? You're like, oh, like 2,400x. And now all of a sudden aluminum is used everywhere. The color purple, this is my favorite thing to nerd out about. I'm not sure if you know this, but it used to be the most expensive thing in the world. The reason why is to make the color purple takes about 10,000 sea snails per gram of the color, right? So just getting the color purple to exist was incredibly hard. And hence why Roman emperors could afford. This is actually a picture of Craig when he was younger. But yeah, and today, obviously, we use purple everywhere. And computing is probably one of the, like, as we've gotten closer to our timeline, the insane progression of efficiency starts just blowing your mind. Like, if you actually go back to the computing in 1940s, we have basically, from a watts per hour producing output, increased the efficiency nearly 1 trillion-fold. So this is, you exist in a time where you just everything is getting more efficient. We've seen the implications of that. Space, you guys have been watching more and more rockets go off, but space shuttle, space travel used to be $65,000 a kilogram. Today it's $60 a kilogram. We have a sky full of satellites because of that. I'm here to talking about everything else on purpose because I think it is really important to approach everything in go-to-market from the fundamentals of what are the things where the cost has already changed and we're just catching up to that. Right, so I think that's the most important part because there are a lot of areas where it's already happening. So we now have AI, right? And the frame for this entire conversation is what in go-to-market used to cost a lot, that could cost a little, and how does that change the engine, right? So if an example I'll give you in a bit is if it would cost you $50,000 to do the appropriate research on a target enterprise account, get into the weeds, find the right people, have the conversations over time, it might actually be worth it. But when those economics change, how does that change the strategy? How do we do something like ABM in a world where it might cost $5 to do something that previously cost $50,000? But before we get into that, so we're going to talk about the shifting unit economics here, things that we've observed and we've been able to see. There'll be 3 specific examples, and I'll walk you through what we did with each of them. But before we get to that, Craig told me that the room was going to be full of marketers, and I was like, I have a bunch of gripes that I want to talk about to you guys. So I'm just going to bitch for a second. So I, as an engineering founder, I used to think a go-to-market operated relatively scientifically. Apparently, that was an illusion, because when I started unraveling, I started trying to understand why things worked the way they did. I found that most of what we do in go-to-market is we actually think about activities that produce what is possibly, has correlation to some outcome. So if I want to go and get an update from my marketing team on what our priorities are, I'll most frequently hear something like, hey, we're going to ship 100 pieces of content, right? And so there's so many of the ways that you reason about what's working is actually on the inputs side. There's, for me as a CEO, I'm like, how do we solve this problem? And there's always a clear answer from everybody in go-to-market, which is, hey, we can spend money here. We can spend more money on ad dollars. We can spend more money on people. And that brings me to this problem, which is most of the time when trying to solve a problem, we just tend to body slam it. Hey, we need another marketer here, or we need someone who does X, or we need someone who does Y. And these all, fundamentally, right, like if you have patterns of things that work, then you can kind of keep copying the same thing that has worked before until it stops working. This brings me to this point, is I have found so many orthodoxies that are just accepted to be true that none of us can really fully explain, right? Just the way we think about taking deals from the top of the funnel all the way through sales, right? The way we run sales as a whole, the way SDRs operate, the cost per SDR, and the amount each SDR can handle. All of these things, right? You actually look at them, you're like, oh, all of the ways those things work can change fundamentally if a lot of the activities that are happening, a lot of the work that's done now become near zero cost. I'm saying this because, yes, everybody in marketing, everybody in go-to-market knows that activities are important towards an outcome. But many of those activities are now a commodity. They do not require a lot of effort to do, and you can do many of them pretty much for zero cost. And this is where I'm generally going to focus most of this conversation, but there's a tendency to avoid narrative violations in go-to-market, especially because we usually have big numbers that are out in front of us. We need to hit them. We're bound to usually all the way up to the board on those numbers. We're really afraid of doing something that changes the way everybody has to think about it, because that requires an enormous amount of, I think, both accountability, but a level of experimentation that rarely companies have the willingness to do. I think most people right now, most go-to-market orgs need to turn everything upside down and kind of swallow that pill a little bit. Because I think most of the things we accept to be true are possibly not true anymore. So what we did, I know someone from OpenAI is here. Right after OpenAI launched deep research, and by the way, to just baseline here on how early we are in the possibilities, deep research launched 9 months ago, right? In February or March, right? And so I played around with deep research for a bit. I'm like, oh, what if we could we deep research 10,000 of our accounts? What would that cost? Could we deep research our markets? What could we do with this context? We started asking this question. So pulled together a couple of our team members, my chief of staff, and we just hunkered down in just north of Marin in this log cabin, and we said, we're going to spend a weekend, we're going to try to build our dream go-to-market tool that can basically run ABM for us. It was our sort of goal for the weekend. And we learned a lot. What we learned is that the cost per account to do these things is so low, and the accuracy and effort is so much higher than accuracy and value is so much higher than anything we had ever seen before from people. If you have an SDR go research an account, they will not write an accurate 30-page report about that account with extremely correct details about all of the use cases. That SDR would get promoted too fast to stay doing that job. But we found that not only could it produce good content, it produced passable content. So one of the tests for us was, could we actually build a deep research report that we could hand over for an industry and hand it over to a CEO in the industry and have it pass the sniff test? They did not think it was AI generated, because we're if they think it's valuable, then we're cooking with something here. So we picked the field services market for our first test, Service Titan, Job, or that kind of crowd. We used OpenAI to build the first deep research analysis, and I sent it to one of the CEOs of those companies. All three of them are customers of ours, so I just sent it over. I'm like, hey, check this out. And the next day he texted me back. He's like, dude, where did you get this? I've never seen an industry report like this. I learned so much. I actually didn't even realize that company existed. And I was like, wow. I was expecting, oh, that's okay. He was asking where we were sourcing this, and I was like, I'll tell you later. And what was interesting is we realized that domain expertise was at our fingertips. So that's the baseline of what we started building our go-to-market engine off of, which is, I realized that was something that we couldn't actually pay for before, right? Even if we paid the best SDRs, we just wouldn't get that kind of result. So then we started thinking, if we actually have an enormous amount of accurate context about the business, their possible use cases of our product, the industry they're in, the economics of that industry, how they buy, the pain points they have, what does that look like when you feed that context to other steps in the AI process, like generating outbound content that might be more readable? How do the reply rates go up, et cetera? And as you start, you just take one of these fundamentals and you go, oh, that's new. And then you start playing it out, and so much more changes. So I'm going to break down sort of what we did here, and I'll show you some examples. First thing we realized is there's actually a hard problem when producing value is commoditized. Because you can produce, you actually see this with engineers and code, you can produce so many PRs that there's actually too many PRs for people to review. And so the bottleneck actually becomes reviewing the AI-generated code. Like, okay, that's a new problem. It's not writing the code anymore. It's actually making sure we don't ship too much insane stuff. So marketing very similarly, how do you actually, you're like, okay, we're going to go and build this like AI-generated research content, but we actually need to make sure that it's not fucking stupid. And that's actually a hard job to do. It requires intelligent people with a reasonable amount of taste. And so we started microsegmenting, not so much because we had to do it from like a go-to-market strategy perspective, but because we needed to figure out what a reasonably diligenceable block of companies was. So we pick under 500 companies per segment, and you can actually go and look at, I can eyeball every company there. I can eyeball the overview of it. I can understand whether or not we're on the right track. Relatively important for us because the way we think about a segment is producing the ground truths that all other AI is going to use to operate. That means generating demos. That means generating content and replies. It means building the appropriate proposal strategy. Like all these things that we do come downstream of the segment and the research built around that. And so we have hundreds of these segments. You can roughly think of them as rough correlations to G2's microsegments and generated a bunch of content around it. And we also, so when I'm going to sort of make a slight point here. So we built this tool, we call it the Flat File CIA, because we're going to know everything about every possible account. Now we have the luxury of actually being able to pick every possible logo we will ever sell to. So like we know in advance who generally is going to use our software. So we have that. It's a great start for an ABM strategy. So then we built this tool that not only pulled together all of the research that was generally publicly available, but we realized that we had 17,000 phone calls that we'd had with accounts over the course of the business. We're like, I want to know what happened in every single one of those calls, and I want, if we collected information 2 years ago from a company, I want to make sure that's remembered. That's a very hard one because that's out in sales notes. That's not necessarily categorized in a way that lets you function off of it, especially for rebounding or outbounding or doing any of these things. So this was just entirely vibe coded over a weekend. I'll talk about how and where I think you should build right now. The general principle I think that has to be followed here is there are some tools that are going to be generally available come 12 more months. Right? If this can be done, someone's going to build it, but we are too early on the curve. So the question becomes, how long do you wait? Are you waiting for Salesforce to launch this feature, or can you put together a small team and hack it out over a weekend and actually get most of the value very quickly? So when you combine the ability for AI to analyze all of your historical activity with accounts and all the public data, you get to some really interesting outcomes here. So account research used to look like buying lists from vendors. We've spent many hundreds of thousands of dollars buying data. I think lean data's here. Fuck you guys. You do a lot of manual research on the most valuable accounts. You build these messaging templates that you try to have variables in to try and get some customization. If you're being cute about it, you might be like, we saw your tweet yesterday, trying to be relevant. But it all actually adds, what? Nobody's ever done that. But it all adds up pretty quickly. So we were doing the same thing, but what we did after is because we had the analysis of the accounts and we had trustable ground truth data, we could actually trust that AI would generate an email or content that customers loved. And this is I'll talk about this a little bit later, but the difference when people feel like they're not actually being fucked with, right? Like they're not being sold to, and you actually send them something of value is actually really incredible. So you're like, hey, AI can go and browse their website, find their docs, figure out everything that company's doing, and say hey, here's we think you have this problem. If you don't, no worries, but if you do, here's exactly how we solve it. And the reply rate, when you actually get that right, is equivalent of if you're a founder and you're like, oh, I'm going to go research this company and send a personal email to the CEO, it just works so much better when it's right. And the cost per account is so low, and the generation time is nearly zero. You don't have to review each individual account, and we could cover all 10,000 accounts that we were targeting. So this is one of these things where you're okay, the before was actually so costly that we wouldn't do it at scale. So we found these things that were worse because they had to be worse in order for us to operate a business. We had to send bad spam emails because it just frankly wasn't economically viable to send good emails, right? That was like, and so we just don't unless they're like better, like super targeted large enterprise accounts. Memories. Memories was so interesting for us. Now, this is where we had a bit of an edge because we have to build this for our core product. But we brought in the team that works on memory, and we said, hey, can we build a memory layer on top of all of our go-to-market data? They're like, sure. So we pulled all of our data from Salesforce, every Gong call, synthesized it, pulled out salient points, and we ended up with this engine that remembers every single data point. So if a rep talked to a prospect back in 2023, that prospect was like, look, we onboard 500 customers a year, costs us an average of whatever, $10,000 per customer, and it currently takes us 90 days. Right? That's data. That's really important data that we could use in a future outbound if we didn't actually close that customer at the time. But that kind of thing, if you're lucky, the rep logs it as a node. If it's in Gong, you search for it, you might be able to find it. But can you actually have something where when you launch that feature later or like you are doing a campaign, you can just be like, hey, I want to see everybody that we previously talked to that had X or Y. And that requires a memory layer to be in place. But also, when you give AI these memories and then you incorporate that into emails or into content, it acts like it knows stuff that it shouldn't, which gets into like creating these magic moments for customers. Oh, I think I talked ahead of my slides. But yes, so this is something that you can actually do quite easily. I'll talk about the hire generally that should be made in go-to-market to be able to kind of pull this forward. I do think there are a couple companies now, like Supermemory, that are actually getting very close to being able to provide this out of the box. But yeah, it is worth figuring this part out, certainly on the ABM side. But then you get a little bit like, so you now have this ground truth data, AI is generating, you have a memory layer, so you can use that. You can use that for outbound, that's great, build top of funnel, or do highly targeted ad campaigns with relevant ads, micro-segmented to the use case. Then you're like, okay, now that people come in the door, we realized that we were setting us up for failure because all the way up to the door, everything's super customized. People are like, oh my God, like you guys like clearly get us. And then they go into a demo, and they got some generic-ass demo, and they run a script, and they're like, okay, I guess I see what you're talking about. It's not fully what I thought it was going to be. And so we're like, okay, could we have AI actually generate the demo script and the demo? Now, we're a developer product, so we tried to figure out how to get AI to configure our product. Right? There's coding that needed to happen to set up a good demo. The demos are very hard to stage with very little notice. You think about like what people practice in the demo are moments, right? The reveals, the timing, the right data at the right moment. For us, we're data prep, so making sure the right errors show up so that we can highlight a feature is really important. So we started having AI we started seeing if AI could actually generate the script and hit all the points that we wanted to hit, right? Could we make sure it included data? And we needed reps to be able to get ready for a demo in under 10 minutes. So they need to be able to read the script and come in prepared. And when we started connecting the fully customized top of funnel with a customized demo, we started getting the reactions we really wanted. Now this, Craig actually told me about this. I think back I wasn't alive in 2010, but apparently NetSuite was. And they actually sort of oriented on they had higher value accounts, but they were able to build these like super customized demo and get their demo conversions up to over 50%. And so it was very interesting. It was inspiration for this. So we're like, okay, how do the numbers actually change if we can kind of close the loop up front? We got to over almost 70% on our demo conversions into sales because when you start getting super targeted up front and can you get your pre-qualification done, and then you meet people with the right demos, we were able to get to an incredibly high hit rate here. And the experience that customers were getting would result in comments like, we actually started bordering on creepy. We had to tone some things back because people would not understand quite how we got it, right? They're like, wait, this isn't public information. How do you know how my business works like this? And we're like, let's go ask OpenAI. I don't know. Apparently it's in the training data somewhere. But it's amazing because it'll go find some PDF or go find some things that someone logged about or a customer complained about, use that to actually orient on what the customer should see. But you get the use case right, you nail the demo. So all of our demos are now entirely custom with sub 15 minutes of prep for each demo that people go into. And the storyline, the data examples, and the use case are entirely generated just in time for the conversation. So we started asking, around this, we started asking what if we can technically create the demo, and now how do we actually take it a step further? And we started calling them magic shows. We actually brought in a magician to teach our team how to build suspense and surprise in demos. And it's actually pretty incredible. When you think about what goes into magic, I don't know how many people have ever been to a magic show that you actually were like, what the fuck about? But you realize that almost all of it is staging, right? The person who's performing the magic, they have done this trick 100 times. For you, it's magic because they're hiding something until the right moment. So obviously demos are fun to play with that, but doing that also in a way that is unique or custom to the customer is what blows people's mind. So we tried to create these moments where our tests, we had this tagged in Gong. Our question was, could we get to a moment in the demo where everybody said something like, it's like you're in my head? Because that's we wanted to figure out
whether we could actually get there, right? So we could what's the story that's going to be told, and then where we get to the next screen and show them the thing, they're like, wait, that's my thing. How did you? I don't get it. And so these things are interesting. You have psychic moments and joy and delight, and figuring out the right moments for improv, where we want to go with improv, and then the gotcha. So this is actually all in a prompt for us. Because it's not just about generating the demo script, it's actually about generating the magic script. It's we need to have these moments at this time, in this way, and surprises. It's actually amazing. AI is pretty good at going and being here's where you're going to surprise the customer. Make sure you do it in this way. Pause right here, etc. And then here's the likely gotchas. Now, this we only could get after we got the market research reports and the company research reports with use case reports. Because then AI would go, well, I know everything about Flatfile's product. And I know that the likely gotchas this customer is going to ask are, but yeah, do you handle 10 gigabyte files, right? It's whatever, this industry is going to have. So we have these tracks that the rep can go down and be ready for them. We set up the gotcha. We want the customer to ask the hard question because we're ready for it, right? So that's a hard one because the customers usually think they're coming at you with something out of left field, but it's amazing. AI is so much better at this than me or any of you. It can figure out what people are likely going to think about as the possible edge cases and head them off. So yeah, it's so we stage the hardest thing. We have all this stuff. So this is all, again, zooming out back to the cost point. This kind of demo, if you were going to do that, it would just cost too much. A rep would spend days with an SE preparing for it. They might have a pre-call with a customer to try and do research, try to figure out their use case. You just couldn't actually do this with reasonable economics or time before, but AI can generate all of it and a script and stage it and make sure the rep's timing things right. We ended up building an internal tool where the rep could have the script on the side that the customer couldn't see while they're doing a demo. You're okay, you can do these things, and the demos just get so much better. So these are 3 examples of things that we've done. We've done a lot more, but each one of them, when you take the economics of researching accounts and you solve that, you're okay, now we can do something that historically just was not possible. How does it change ABM? Well, now you know 10,000 accounts and exactly how to target each one. And there's more we've done, right? We've taken data from figuring out who in the company to go and talk to is always extremely hard, especially for us, because nobody, for some reason, likes to gives himself reasonable titles in our world. So it's okay, I don't know who's doing this, but we can kind of imagine if we just look at everybody in the company and kind of fantasize an entire org structure and go, it's probably right there. And so we were able to get AI to do that too, and with extreme accuracy, pick who in the org we should be talking to. So operationalizing this right now is quite difficult. There's a couple products that are emergent in market right now. I think some of you guys might have funded some of them. You might know right now kind of what's closer to the edge. But given that we are sub 12 months into reasonably deployable AI and go to market, there's just very few good buyable options yet. I expect the next 12 months we'll get decent early stage tools, and 2 years from now, everything and 10 times more than anything I can imagine right now is going to be available. But I think there's a decent amount of alpha in figuring out how to pull forward this into your org right now. We certainly experience it. And the way I think about it is, if the cost of these luxuries are dropping, there's a moment in time where you get to deliver a luxury that feels surprising and amazing to a customer. Like a personalized email is a luxury, like a truly personalized email, or a personalized demo, or us actually understanding everything about your business. These are luxuries. But the market, as these things become more generally available, is going to begin expecting them. So right now, you get to get the value of just being first and surprising people with it. But either way, it's just going to become expected, right? People are going to have less and less tolerance for AI slop and random useless emails and spam. So I actually, one of the things, I'm generally bullish on AI creating a lot more quality because it decreases the cost of creating quality. It decreases the effort to create quality. And because of that, there's a lot of reward in generating quality, right? Well, I think generally people are going to expect a level of service and a level of an experience in the buying process that is unreasonable today. I don't know if any of you like travel. I'm like a luxury hotel aficionado. I don't have much money for it, but I do enjoy going to a hotel where they're like, "Hello, Mr. Boskovic." I'm like, "How do you know?" They're like, "Oh yeah, we handed pictures around to everybody this morning, so you walk in, they know who you are." And then they hand you a hot towel, so you put your suitcase down to take the hot towel, and someone scoots your suitcase away, and you're like, "Whoa!" People are there's something getting coordinated here behind the scenes that's kind of crazy. And I think that's what we can do now in go-to-market, where the experience for the buyer, the orientation of everything we do is actually on what is the buyer's best experience, assuming we have targeted them correctly and they actually want our product. What is the best imaginable experience the buyer would go through in acquiring that? And then try to remove as many of the bumps along the way. The way we have done this is, I think, this is basically, you can immediately do almost everything that we just did with a single hire. So you need, basically, I call these folks vibe coders. They're not really AI engineers. They're usually early in their career. They might have just gone through a coding school of some sort. They're kind of crazy. They think they can do anything. And that's exactly what you want. So what's amazing is if any of you have played around with Claude Code or Lovable, and you just go into these tools and you say, build me an app that downloads all of my accounts from Salesforce over $50,000 every hour and do X and Y with them and sync it with X. It'll literally, that prompt is all you need to do right now. It is incredibly accessible to build internal tools that have an operational layer. So getting one of these people who believes they can do that, right? Right now, if you're going to go to your RevOps team and say something like that, I'm guessing most of you are grimacing at what you would expect from that. So you need to kind of steer around it and figure out how to get someone like this into the operational side of the org. Because the moment you get that, the first time you feel that power of being oh, I can just prompt this person to go do something, and tomorrow I have this new kind of tool or insight or report or process that literally didn't exist yesterday, doesn't exist in market. You can start imagining what you can do. So I think you should pay these people whatever they want. I think they're they're going to be worth their weight in gold. I will share some notes on where to find people like this, just to make recruiting a little bit easier. I think the best place is these AI coding boot camps, AI coding weekends. They're just it proves people can go and spend 32 hours vibe coding something of value, and that doesn't mean they're going to go get a job as an AI engineer anywhere. And just a question for the ops. This timer here, there's going to be two timers. Is this my overall timer? Timer 1. Okay, okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Then I'm running on perfect schedule. Fuck, that's unusual. Okay, so future for us, we have arrived, it is becoming increasingly obvious that in go-to-market particularly, where there's an enormous number of activities to coordinate to get something really good out of the engine, a lot of the work that is the tactical work that can be done can be entirely automated. So the question we have at Flatfile is, what does the engine look like that can coordinate roughly 1,000 virtual employees all doing different things and producing an insane amount of content that is nearly impossible to review in go-to-market? So this is the AI-first go-to-market org, and in general, AI-first orgs of any sort actually have a wild complexity problem to solve for, because it effectively feels like operationally like you're adding hundreds of employees, because you have to have the similar accountability layers, to have the similar application of judgment, etc. But so the ability to do these things doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually apply it. And that's where when we've run into bottlenecks with this, great, we can do all of this, but then what? Like after the demo, then what? And then you start realizing there's actually a lot of things in the business that still need to be optimized to work with the same engine. Like for example, we have custom demos, people get through the custom demo, you're like, and then what? Well, now we're going to get to a POC, and we're like, oh, we need to auto-generate our POCs too, otherwise we're going to set everybody up for failure. You're like, everything in the company has to start kind of following the same set of principles. For us, we're aiming to kind of flip our entire go-to-market org on its head. We are most of the way there, where the orchestration layer is basically happening like software. I talked about this with Craig as like treat the company like a software product rather than an organization, because most of the operating roles will become automated, and like put people in as basically check functions or something that AI assigns work to. Instead of people assigning work to the AI, letting AI go, hey, I need a person to review this email before I send it. Or AI goes, hey, I have a customer that emailed, and here's what I propose the response looks like. Can someone review it and send it? So once you start doing that, and kind of like the din of everything that's happening gets into the operational engine, the more we've done that, the easier it is for people to focus on the things that really matter. And I would say like the people who survive this move are people that like, back to this like watts per hour, I think there's limited value in people purely being energy conversion machines anymore. So I think what's really important is to cultivate taste and good judgment, because that's something that can actually scale really well. So the people on our team that we have like promoted and pushed further into this process are people who can operate at a scale of 10x what they were before, because they're responsible for taste. Let's say content, for example. How do you get AI to produce great content? So AI can produce great content if the person driving it knows what great content looks like, knows how to judge it, and is unashamed or unabashed about like pursuing that. Like they'll spend a week playing with the prompts, figuring out how to get the content that actually makes sense. The only person who can do that is someone who actually thinks content, has their own taste and their own idea of what good content is. But a lot of the people we've hired in go-to-market frequently have been like operational sort of cogs, not to like overstate the point, but like we need to generate 100 content pieces, and we need people who can take an order and go create that and produce it with reasonable value. I don't think that's where we optimize anymore. I think we optimize for people who we like the way they make decisions, and we like the way they think about the world, and we give them all of the power and sort of the operational structure to pursue that. I didn't include too many numbers in this. The net of what we were able to do over the course of 3 quarters, that each quarter we spent half as much and tripled our pipeline capacity. So we kept dropping the cost and kept increasing the amount of pipeline we were generating. So yeah, I think this is a bit of what the future looks like. I think we've pulled some of these things forward. We've learned some insane things about how the economics of go-to-market are changing. I'd encourage all of you to experiment here. Like just figure out what like big, costly thing that you currently think is like, we couldn't do that because that's too expensive. Like, is that still true, right? Is it fundamentally still true? I think in a lot of cases it's not. So I think that brings me to the end. At 6 seconds to go, I'm quite on time. And you feel free to email me, feel free to ping me on Twitter. And happy to have conversations. I'm happy to share code, examples, or prompts on any of the things that we did. There's nothing proprietary there. So just happy to just generally share freely here. If you have teams that are interested in chasing this down, happy to hook them up with the folks on our team that have built it and be helpful. All right, Q&A, UQ all A.
Hi, thank you, first of all. Courtney Summarize from Middesk. When you're talking about dropping costs and multiplying your ROI, exactly what things are you dropping out of your budget to drop costs? Is it headcount? Is it other tools? Like how does that kind of decrease to increase happen?
Yeah, so I think we started off with a relatively primitive engine for generating pipelines. So we were spending a lot of ad dollars, pretty spray and pray. So you think about like just optimizing that engine. Start with like targeting the right accounts and the right people. Plug that into LinkedIn, half the cost, right? So like each of these things that we did, we were able to like as we got each piece better, we were able to produce more of the right result for less spend. And then like we started outbounding for us was always an absolute nightmare. We could never really get anything of value, but then we started seeing the right type of content. Outbound's pretty cheap if you get people to reply to emails. And so we started realizing there are these like things that like you could actually make work, and the economics of making them work were like meaningful enough that they affected our bottom line. Now, in a highly optimized business, those I doubt you could do the kind of cost changes that we have the same way, but you could move the numbers meaningfully.
What's something that is on the edge right now that you talk about that you hope will work that hasn't worked?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is interesting. So one of the things we really want to do is we want to generate videos. Like we have a media team that generates like high quality production content around different use cases, etc. And we are getting pretty confident that we're going to be able to like auto-generate verticalized variants of that with different scripts and different content that are production grade and don't feel like AI, by providing like a baseline. Still, Nano Banana right now is getting very close. I think we need another round before like you pass that like surreal side. But like production level content that like mentions your business is like, I mean, we've done some manually to test the reactions, and people just like it's insane. But I think that's coming, right? The ability to send you a 3-minute video that basically hits all the key points and makes it feel like we put a production team behind it.
Sorry, I had the mic. So, David, great to see you again, Sydney, with G2 and Scale. And I saw you do this earlier this year, so it's amazing how you continue to invest in it. I worry sometimes when you have the ability to access every single contact and build an email that we enter into spam and send too many emails and flush it. So how do you figure out when is the right time to do warm outbound and not spam?
I'm not the expert on that. I think we're a very small team. We're mostly primitive on that. But like we focused on the first principle we focus on is just quality. Right? Is this an email that I actually care to receive and want? And then when does email actually work? We found that emails from founders to executives or founders, so all emails come from me, right? Like they're not actually coming, but you get it. But so yeah, it's like we play with some of these things. Smaller emails, like smaller rounds of emails, and we have only 10,000 accounts we're targeting, so it's not like there's a huge volume. So just like higher quality updates that go to the right few people in the business rather than spamming the entire company, we found works a lot better for us. We've been able to get reply rates like at a much higher level by like almost an order of magnitude than baseline. Good.
Thanks. This is great. I'm trying to get my team to do this. They won't do it. I'm actually curious to understand how has this helped your deals go quicker down the funnel? And 2, how has this increased your win rates?
Yeah, I would say this is an interesting one. We have 2 working theories right now. First of all, sometimes it makes them move faster. Sometimes it actually makes them move slower. The downside of blowing people's minds out of a gate is that people start thinking it's a bigger thing. So like we'll end up like, so our ACV has gotten incredibly high. But in some cases, you go to a new layer in the business. $1 million deal moves slower than a $100,000 deal at the door. Sometimes it's hard to wind people back from like the excitement. So we've just leaned into that. We're okay with some of the like deal cycles that I've run, and we've just gotten better at closing like the big deals. And I think we're still working on how the pipeline overall works in this world. I think we keep running into things where like, oh, there's still this part, like we've kind of set expectations so high here, and like meeting them can be very laborious along the way. I think we're getting to a place where end to end now, from like the demo all the way through implementation, we're able to carry through the same context and the same pace and speed. And for us, the bottleneck for the last 6 months has been POCs, right? You get them to that door, and then you like grind to get through the work. And that's like traditional sales stuff. So yeah, I think there's problems we haven't yet optimized. For us, generating the pipeline was obviously the biggest thing that helped us. Like we
pivoted from an SMB go-to-market strategy to an enterprise go-to-market strategy and changed everything. We were able to basically, over the course of under 6 months, generate an entire new go-to-market strategy and an entire new pipeline engine. So I think that was those are the receipts that we have now, and we'll share more as we go. Yeah.
Is this on? Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the account-based marketing historically has been focused on just enterprise accounts.
Yeah.
Now, with this new approach, have you found that you've been able to go a little downstream and even focus on small and mid-sized accounts? Yeah. And for those founders who are in the consumer space, maybe even for them to use it to target consumers?
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about consumers. I've been in B2B all my life, so I'll answer the one I can, which is yes, right? On the economics, at least, you can target incredibly small companies incredibly accurately. And usually, certainly from the ABM side, it's easier to pick the exact person to talk to, et cetera. We go to mid-market and kind of stop just because the ROI of what we provide isn't actually useful for us to pursue lower. So we haven't tried going lower, but there's no reason on the economics you can't. Yeah, it just doesn't cost much, so why not?
Thank you. Do you feel that at a point where AI is ubiquitous with every marketing team or every go-to-market team, where content, highly personalized content, is the norm, that the market will start to be, we'll start seeing diminishing returns in that personalization?
Absolutely.
You used to be cool, if I got a BDR
on
node,
principle.
So how do we manage that then, where everything is personalized, we're going to become numb to it?
Yeah. I think we're all going to try to get drivel back because that makes us feel better now. I'm bullish that this actually makes the world a better place to live in that it becomes much more like you and me having a conversation about value. There's no world where that stops being valuable. If I can stop wasting my time on things that I don't care about and I get the things that I do care about at the right time, and if that becomes the status quo, I think it'll be just good for business, right? On the base principles, if we have a product of value and we can introduce ourselves to you and you understand what we do, the first job is done. It doesn't really matter how we got there. So I can't see a world, if everybody was a millionaire, would we all be broke? I don't know. I think we're likely to see an enormous amount of commoditized luxury, right? So back to this point, it's a luxury today, some alpha and just being first, but once it's commoditized, it'll just be the expectation. And I think, yeah, you won't get the value of being different, but it'll still be good.
Thank you. Fantastic insights. Thank you. Have you had a chance?
We'll find out in a year or two whether they're fantastic, but they are insights.
So far, steps on a journey. Have you had a chance to draw any conclusions yet about whether the characteristics of what makes a great human seller or a sales leader are changing?
Sales, I thought I had a perspective on this that I am still evolving. I'm uncomfortable yet thinking I have a good model for sales because sales is such a relational thing. It's unclear to me how that evolves. Our current operating theory is that the relationship is the only thing that matters in the sales deal from a traditional perspective, because everything else, right, making sure the customer has their questions, their SEs, the negotiation, the contracting, most of that is going to get commoditized. We're just going to get really good at operationalizing it. But the relationship, everybody needs a face to follow. So my instinct is, and we've done this, we've put our salespeople into a role called producers. So they basically just follow the deal along, and we actually swap in and out different sort of operating roles or AI along the way. And the producers aren't your traditional salespeople, right? They're mostly there, kind of like account managers, right, to babysit the deal. Now, I think there's challenges, right? Sales is a accountability engine for the most part, and I think that there's some flaws there. So we'll see. I think on the marketing side, it's a lot more obvious how that's going to change, right? It's there's a lot more volume of good content and good work gets done, and people take roles of managing that and exercising judgment on it. And I think that requires mostly a reorg in marketing in almost all companies. I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Yeah, I'm interested in the mechanics of what you did.
Sorry.
Like the mechanics, so the product development flow. Like how
Finally, a nerdy question.
Huh? Yeah. So like it's kind of like the product development flow you pick to do with your go-to-market teams, because I've seen like a lot of. It's easy to now build, but then building quality scale products starts to go down. So I see a lot of novelty go out there. This is super cool, works a couple of times, and then falls off in terms of value add to the organization. So trying to understand, like, when you picked a philosophy, did you build? Do you pull out part of your team? Did you hire in a separate team to kind of go and create that pod to increase the quality of the products?
This is not a product, like, we are not a go-to-market software company. This is an internal tool that we built for our own use, and a customer of one is very easy to please. And so I think, in general, if you're vibe coding an internal tool and you have a problem with it, you can vibe code a different internal tool just as fast or evolve it. We've seen nearly no reasons why, hey, I like how we did this, but can we actually have it remove all the people that are accounts older than 5 years so they aren't sure? Like, that is a prompt that is then just solved for, right? So it's like internal tools, we're unafraid of just taking on pretty much anything we want to do and evolving it. So I think if we were trying to productize this, absolutely, there's a lot more work that has to be figured out. So someone's going to, back to the point, we need another 12 months in market for someone to actually take something like this, make it generally available for people, because there's a lot of work in productizing this that hasn't yet happened. Okay. All right, well, guys, thanks for grilling me. Thanks for being here.